Alright, so I said I was going somewhere with all this. Is it okay if I start with a parable? I promise it's not just me repeating myself. I celebrated New Year's 2014 in the Boston Common with my girlfriend, and after ringing in the new year, we took the 2 a.m. train back towards her place in Providence. And you can imagine, 2 a.m. New Year's Day, the train had a fair share of loud, drunk 20-somethings. And after a half hour or so of in-your-face revelry, a dude at the front of the train turned around and yelled at them, "You need to keep it down. It's late. We're tired. You're not the only people in the world, much less this train." And the exact moment he finished talking, someone yelled, "Eat a dick, man," and they all laughed him down and got back to celebrating. And yes, that's Angry Jack in a nutshell, responding to maybe be a decent person with "go fuck yourself," and going right back to business as usual. But here's the thing. After a couple minutes, the train car quieted down because the air was sucked out. Everyone was self-conscious now. It's one thing to blithely keep the party going without thinking how it affects others, and another when you know full well how it affects them because they just told you. Something that was ignorant is now spiteful, and spite is harder to sustain. It takes effort. Jack doesn't want to think about how his games or gamer culture affect women, but thanks to Anita Sarkeesian and Zoe Quinn and Lee Alexander and several dozen other women, he can't help it. And he can tell himself that when he's done shouting them down, or when his worst allies are done ripping their lives apart, that everything will go back to normal. But it won't. He won't just stop noticing what these women pointed out to him. The war against social justice is something to do with his frustrated anger, but there is no win state for him. And that's a big part of why he's so angry. He wants his innocence back, and he can't have it. Not now, not ever. When all's said and done, the women Jack is railing against are fighting for things like representation, respect, equal pay in the industry, the right to be on the internet without being shamed, objectified, or harassed. Jack is fighting against being uncomfortable. That's just not the same kind of skin in the game. The treatment of these women is horrifying, and yet most of them are still here. Jack left Gamergate when Stephen Colbert made fun of him. So, if you'll permit me to get starry-eyed for a moment, I think that's why we're gonna win this thing. Now, lest you think I'm saying let's all sit back and await this glorious utopia, no. Let's talk about how we might win this thing. You may remember way back at the beginning of these videos, I said I'm not here to tell women what they should do about the men harassing them. That's not my place. I want to talk to other men about what we can do. Though, if you want a proper primer in allyship, you should read Lee Alexander's list of do's and don'ts. I am not an expert. I am not an authority. I'm just a guy who used to be 15 and angry and figuring myself out online. Remember when I said Jack is not a person, he's a condition similar to being drunk? If you have an ounce of privilege in you, you have been Angry Jack many, many times in your life. And I promise you, you will be him again. It happens. It's the default reaction to having your privilege checked, sometimes even having it acknowledged. If you don't make a conscious choice to be better than that, it's just the path of least resistance. Remember that Jack is, mostly, a reasonable person when he turns back into Dr. Jekyll. Surely you've heard people say something truly unconscionable just to win an argument because, for them, there's nothing at stake in choosing to believe something ugly for a minute. The kind of thing you're pretty sure they wouldn't have said 24 hours earlier, but that they believe in this moment because it suits their needs to believe it. I worry that's where the far radical end of Gamergate comes from. Someone challenges an assumption and the question is, what do I need to believe to write this off? So they pick an argument, and when that gets challenged, they pick another, and again, and again, and again, and every time someone offers them a chance to pop that bubble, they double down. Enough links in this chain, and all that's left that can justify what they've said and done is to believe there's a shadowy feminazi conspiracy insinuating itself into positions of power in league with the Gates Foundation to brainwash you through popular media in order to suppress men or something. And I'm not even kidding. What I know is that if I were today the 15-year-old I used to be, I might be going down that road. I got lucky. I saw these arguments, but I saw people I respected disagreeing. I saw them when I wasn't the one who was angry. The effect on audiences of video personalities who rail against Anita Sarkeesian like Mundane Matt and Thunderfoot is to prime them to be distrustful of feminism. so that the first time they see tropes versus women, they have a prefab argument for dismissing it. The videos say, "Don't worry, we did the thinking for you." They want people to go in angry. And people will. Susan Faludi points out that these backlashes historically don't happen in response to social gains for women, but in anticipation of them. Remember that Sarkeesian wasn't originally attacked for saying anything about video games, but for saying she was going to say something. And Gamergate liked to paint games journalism as being overrun with social justice warriors, but Morgan Ramsey ran the numbers and found that about 0.4% of the gaming press is talking explicitly about feminism. These backlashes are recurring things. They don't happen when feminism is embraced. They happen preemptively, whenever it looks like feminism might be embraced. Which means, sadly, it's only a matter of time until the next Gamergate. And how bad the next one is will depend on how we take care of our community between now and then. So my suggestion is that we talk to Jack. When you see a friend or acquaintance on Twitter, or even just some rando in the comments, hulking out because something some woman said makes him fear that his place in future society is as some kind of social justice outcast, doomed to a life of exile followed by eternal damnation, and he starts spewing whatever he needs to spew to believe that won't happen because the woman's beneath his respect, maybe it's your turn to say something. This is a person choosing to prioritize his feelings over another person's well-being. And because the internet is public, when that doesn't get picked up and unpacked, we send a very unpleasant message to everyone who sees it about how acceptable it is to do so. So be public in your response. Use dot replies, make a storify, put it on Tumblr. You don't have to scream, but be heard. Talk to Jack. Be calm, be reasonable, be clear. I imagine getting shitty with Jack is plenty cathartic if you've been on the receiving end of his abuse, or if you are at risk of being on the receiving end of his abuse. But if you're not, then it doesn't really accomplish anything, and you're more useful picking apart his arguments than getting self-righteous. You probably won't persuade him. He's not in a headspace that would allow that to happen, and he doesn't respect you enough to really hear you. But remember, this isn't about him. You just don't want him to persuade anybody else. He'll put on the affectations of a debate, but this isn't really a debate to him. What he says will functionally be a list of reasons for why he doesn't have to debate you, which is why he will change the subject rather a lot. His every argument is meant to be the last word followed by a door slam, and to him, your every rebuttal is dragging him back through the door to tell him what a bad person he is. He will then find any excuse to dismiss that argument and try slamming the door again. The need for calm and clarity in the face of this is not because Jack is deserving of your respect and empathy. As a human being, he deserves those things from life, but not necessarily from you. You're trying to make it clear to anyone watching which one of you is making the most sense. Your duty is to the proto-Angry Jack out there on the internet who could go either way. Jack's goodness as a human being is the least of your concerns, and you need that to be really obvious. Talk to Jack. It's frustrating, tedious work, but if you're a dude, especially a dude with a lot of privileges, it's rarely dangerous work. You don't do it to defend anyone, you don't do it to protect anyone, you don't do it for brownie points. You do it because you're in the position to do it and because it's the decent thing to do. There is no glamour in this, and if you win slowly. Step away when you need to step away, if you feel threatened or just emotionally drained, but when the time comes, step back in. What Jack can't do is respectfully disagree with someone, but we can, though be careful not to treat his argument as deserving of respect. We don't need a supermajority of the internet chiming in to improve the conversation. If even 5% of the internet could be counted on to say something, that would be great. 5% would mean most groups of 20 or more would have at least one person we could count on to speak up. Imagine the comment sections. Jack often operates on the thinking that basically everyone but a handful of feminazis and beta males agrees with him and are just too afraid to speak up. Silence perpetuates that myth. It doesn't take very many of us to make it seem less credible. And Jay Smooth, while talking about race, stresses that if you keep the conversation focused on what a person says rather than getting mired in who the person is, you might, if you're lucky, actually get through to them maybe 1 time in 10. 1 out of 10 isn't a great average, and it can't really be your focus, and it doesn't make dealing with the other 9 times any more enjoyable. But I would say, whatever the next Gamergate is, getting any people out of it is worth the effort. We don't have supervillains, and this isn't going to end with a victory dance. Our individual actions are weak, but they're necessary, and they do add up. We just do our part, put in our hours, and slowly sculpt our communities into better places. And Jack's heart won't grow 3 sizes as he embraces this gleaming new future. In all likelihood, Jack will end up back in his room sulking about how no one understands him, about how he can't say 5 words online without somebody challenging him, how it's so unfair, how everyone hates him. But sooner or later, he has to get back to his day-to-day life. Calm down, turn back into Bruce Banner, comb his hair, open his door, go back outside, and see that the world didn't go to shit when we started listening to women.